You're listening to GOAZCATS.com today, a podcast all about your Arizona Wildcats. Featuring the latest news and analysis from the staff at GOAZCATS.com. Now, straight from the old Pueblo, Tucson, Arizona, here's the host of GOAZCATS.com today.
Let's get right into it. Like we mentioned, not a real high point for the program this past week. NAU, Arizona, first loss for Arizona against NAU since 1932. And Arizona got up to a 13-0 start, and it was all downhill for the Wildcats.
Yeah, I mean, it was one of those games where you said, okay, I think they figured it out, finally. You know, it's about time. I think everyone penciled in, hey, this is NAU. They're going to win. They have to win. How could you not win this game? It's an FCS opponent, and it's a bad one at that. And then, obviously, things just went haywire, and it kind of started with Will Plummer's interception in the second quarter, turns into a touchdown. And things kind of unraveled from there. I mean, you had another interception. You had just a lot of issues offensively, and that's really where the problems stem from for Arizona right now is offensively they just don't have a lot to build on. I mean, you don't really know who your quarterback's going to be. We're recording this on Monday after Jedd Fisch's weekly press conference, wrapping up the last game. He obviously has had a chance to watch the film, evaluate things a little bit more. Everyone, I think, went into the press conference saying, Jordan McLeod's going to be the guy. Jordan McLeod's going to be your quarterback. We leave the press conference going, nobody knows. Jedd Fisch doesn't know. He said he hopes to have an answer by Tuesday. But at this point, it's anybody's game. I think everyone's going to get their shot as they head into practice this week. But not a good place for Arizona to be with no quarterback and no clear answers offensively because there's so many issues on the entire offense. And it's just you want to have that quarterback decision made and have that position settled, but they just don't have it right now.
Yeah, and I think Coach Fisch's ideal situation after NAU, it would have been clear as day Will Plummer was going to be the quarterback headed into this week. But we watched Gunnar Cruz. He was indecisive, couldn't make decisions. He put in Will Plummer, turns over the football, which we knew was going to happen, but he also missed wide open guys, and Jedd Fisch said it in his press conference. Tavion Cunningham open down the middle, Bryce Wolma open at times. They're just continuation of missing guys. So you go to Jordan McLeod in the last two drives of the game. He goes 5 for 5 on that last drive, 50 yards and a touchdown. And like you were saying, we figured that's the guy. But when you're going through an evaluation process, I don't know if you can see on film if there is one in particular guy that deserves a starting job because Jordan McLeod still is kind of new to the system.
New to the system, and then we found out today because someone asked about Alex Lyons and what he's supposed to do in that situation, in the 2-point conversion. Mm-hmm. And Jedd Fisch, I don't think he wanted to out, the quarterback in this instance. I mean, he's not one to throw his players under the bus, but he said Jordan made a decision and didn't tell Alex Lyons what the call was. There's a mix-up, leads to no 2-point conversion being completed. Arizona doesn't tie the game and loses. Mm-hmm. That's on the quarterback. That's on Jordan McLeod. So maybe those things get ironed out as he gets more time to play, but everyone is leaning on from the outside, it feels like the fan base is leaning on, hey, he has experience, so just throw him in there. He looked fine. The team looked better with him at the quarterback position. But if you're going to have mistakes like that in a crucial moment, that's not good, and coaches don't like to see that. And so each guy kind of has his faults. I mentioned all along, Will Plummer, you're going to have to take the bad with the good. Mm-hmm. The bad being he's going to throw interceptions. It's just what he does. He did it in high school. He did it in practice when we watched him during the spring, during training camp a little bit, but it was really noticeable in the spring, and that's one of those things that we talked about when everyone said, hey, he had a first couple really strong days in spring camp and then just tailed off. It was because of those interceptions and because of the turnovers, and that's where he said Gunnar Cruz is in line to win this job because he doesn't do those things. He did those things against BYU, did those things against San Diego State. Now it's like, where do you turn? And every quarterback has their faults, and I think we saw kind of the true essence of what Will Plummer is in the NAU game. He's going to turn it over, but he's also going to hit Booby Curry for a 49-yard touchdown. Mm-hmm. I mean, you're going to have those explosive plays. Jordan McLeod hit some explosive plays. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens with the quarterback position and what Jedd Fisch and the staff decide to do.
And, I don't know how you go about making some decisions in terms of in-game decisions because you have those problems with Gunnar Cruz that hesitates to throw the ball. You have the turnover problems with Will Plummer. You have the communication, obviously, issues with Jordan McLeod, like Jedd Fisch said. But the offensive issues all stem, in my opinion, from one problem, so that's going to be difficult to fix. It's offensive line. I don't know if it matters who you put back there. If you're not getting time to pass, if you're not getting downfield run game, what do? How do you go about fixing an offense when your offensive line is pretty broken?
Yeah, I mean, that is where, and I think we've talked about this before, that is to me where all the issues stem from offensively. Mm-hmm. A lot of people have pointed to the running game being just not even subpar, but being flat out bad.
Yeah.
That to me, that is impacted by what's going on up front. Yeah. There's just no holes to run through. There's no push. I think that was one of the stark kind of things that really got my attention against NAU watching from the press box. Arizona was, I believe, down close to the south end zone, trying to get going, trying to get any kind of push. And NAU's defensive line was pushing Arizona's offensive line back and offensive linemen off their feet. They were falling backwards, and you're going, this is NAU. That's not supposed to happen. You're playing Oregon in a week. You can't be falling backwards on run plays and getting pushed off the line like that. And so it's dismal. I mean, the offensive line play, and I wanted to put this last week, but I was like, I don't know if I can go this far with it, that it's been atrocious. I mean, it's just been bad. And so, and you're right, it's not getting any better. There's no fixes here. There's no superstar in the waiting in the wings that they're just not playing for whatever reason. They're playing their best guys, and that's the unfortunate part, is the guys that are potentially going to end up being strong offensive linemen for this team are just too young right now, and I don't think the staff wants to put them out there. It's a difficult position to play. You want to have veteran guys out there. Yes, there is that moment where you can play a freshman and he ends up being the right guy for the job, but I think they're maxed out right now on their talent in terms of what they can do. There's no big secret superstar waiting in the wings, like I said, and it's up to Brendan Carroll now to really figure out how to get this group going, because now it is going to fall on him. You're now going into your fourth game. You got to get these guys right. I know there's a talent disparity. There's a bunch of issues with the talent right now on this team, especially up front on the offensive line, but it's up to him to develop them and at least get them in line to do something, because right now, like you mentioned, I don't know if it matters who's back there playing quarterback, because there's just no time to throw. They're not able to do anything offensively, and that's a real big issue.
Yeah, and you mentioned it, saying the word horrific. I mean,
atrocious.
Atrocious, horrific.
They all fit.
They all mean the same thing, but I look at Arizona's offensive line and think about the offensive lines that I've seen over the years at Arizona football, rather it be Stoops' line, Rich Rodriguez's line, part of Sumlin's line. This might be the worst group Arizona's had up front in quite some time.
Yeah, I wouldn't argue that at all. I mean, there's not a lot of size, but to me, like I said, the biggest thing is just I don't know what's missing, but there's just not a lot of talent there right now, and I thought there would be. I thought there was some talented guys up front. Donovan Laie hasn't looked like himself. Jordan Morgan hasn't looked like himself. Obviously, he's been dealing with an injury, but it's just been a non-existent group, and it's a difficult spot to be in when you don't really know what's going on with your quarterback either.
And that puts a lot of pressure on the defense. I mean, you look at the job Arizona did defensively throughout that game. They gave up 2 touchdowns technically. I know it was 21 points, but that's a pick 6 overall. They did a pretty good job against NAU, and Coach Jedd Fisch mentioned it. I think it was 19 straight games of 400 or more yards. That came to an end this past weekend. 222 yards, I believe, was the total for NAU. I know it's NAU, but we've seen Arizona give up so many yards defensively over the years. It looked like an improved product out there on the field.
Yeah, I mean, outside of the first quarter or so against San Diego State, this group has been pretty good.
Yeah.
Especially, again, there's a talent disparity there. Whether they want to believe it or not, or whether fans want to believe it or not, I think there is more talent on the defensive side of the ball right now, but it's not like it's amazing talent. I think there are some really strong pieces. You probably have, if you have NFL caliber players that are on the defensive side of the ball, I'm thinking of Christian Roman Wallace right now, off the top of my head, but if you have NFL talents on that side of the ball, so it's not like he has nothing to work with. But you also have to get those guys to play together, a lot of new pieces that are coming together, and I think he's done a pretty good job of getting that group to play well and play together. Obviously, fans are disappointed in the lack of blitzes and the lack of aggression, but he's kind of working with what he has right now, and maybe that'll come, and maybe, again, he doesn't want to necessarily show Oregon everything that they're doing and show all the Pac-12 schools what they're doing. I understand, hey, you're just trying to win right now, so show whatever you can do, and whatever is going to work, you go out and do that, but I don't know that we've seen the whole Don Brown playbook at this point. I think we start to see it starting this week, but the defense hasn't been the issue, and I don't think I've come away, outside of maybe the Oregon State game, feeling this way, but the 2 games that that bookend this thing. I haven't said the defense is the problem. And if you think about it, the defense did enough to have this team at 2-1.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the reality. This team could be 2-1 right now if not for the offense. And to me, that's where the bigger issues are.
Yeah, I think the first game, obviously, there were quarterback issues in terms of hesitating. Gunnar Cruz got stronger throughout the game. This last game, offensive inept. The whole entire offense struggled. Run game, pass game, blocking. He mentioned receiver blocking, Coach Jedd Fisch, and they just got to find a way to fix it, because waiting for them in Autzen Stadium isn't a friendly environment at all.
And what do you think, because I was struggling to write positives about this game. I was trying to find some. And what do you think some of the positives were? I think you mentioned receivers. I do think Booby Curry emerging, getting his first 2 career touchdown passes catches was a big deal. I think that's something that Arizona's been waiting to see happen. So I think that's a big deal. But what were some of the positives for you?
Yeah, Booby Curry, I would say, is number 1 on my list. 2 touchdown passes. Looked really good out there. 2 touchdown receptions. He's not passing the ball, but receptions. But Jalen John, in my opinion, was a big bright spot. I know he just had 1 drive, but I believe he had 4 carries for 30 yards, and he looked good out there.
37 rushing yards.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden he stopped. Like, they stopped using Jalen John. I don't get it, but I thought that was a big bright spot for the backfield.
To me, the big thing with Jalen John, when you look at the stat categories and you go through the box score, there's a list there for that it's lost yards. And typically, guys are going to have a few lost yards. Running backs, there's going to be some tackles for loss, and they're going to lose yards. Jalen John had 0 in that category, and that's behind Arizona's offensive line, which we were just talking about. And so, to me, that's significant. That says something about his game and what he was able to do. That means he's going forward, getting you positive yards, and that's what any running back coach, any head coach, offensive coordinator, that's what they're going to be looking for. To me, you heard about him, you saw him. He did some nice things in camp, showed some nice things last season. But he's not been one of the featured guys. You're talking about the top 3 guys have been Drake Anderson, Michael Wiley, Stevie Rocker. Michael Wiley has a fumble. Who knows if we've seen the loss to Michael Wiley, because you don't fumble for this team. You can't afford to have guys fumbling the football. And so maybe Jalen John is now that 3rd back that gets into that rotation. They use him a little bit more, but to me he proved something in this game, and I think it's all about making positive plays. That's what he did. That's what this offense needs right now. Maybe we see a little bit more of him moving forward.
Yeah, and I think defensively, we mentioned Christian Roland Wallace a lot of the time, but he shined against NAU. He had the pick, he had a couple bat downs, had a couple really good tackles. He was a defensive bright spot, but the whole entire defense, they created turnovers, because the first 2 games, Arizona hasn't created a turnover, and they finally were able to create those turnovers, give their offense a chance to get back out there on the field. That could be huge for this team moving forward.
Yeah, and well, I always said, I think we talked about it last week, I said the NAU game to me felt like obviously you want to win and you're expecting to win, but I think it felt like one of those games where you can try some different things out, learn a lot about yourself, and get things going right before you head to Oregon, because you're going to need to play at your best to even have a chance to beat them. One thing we hadn't seen from Arizona so far defensively were those turnovers, were those takeaways. They have 3 takeaways, I think, on all fumble recovery. They created 2 fumbles, but recovered one of them. The 2 interceptions. Kenny Abair finally gets himself involved. He's been kind of in and out of practice throughout the camp, throughout the offseason, and we weren't really sure, I wasn't really sure at least, what to expect from him. He plays an interesting position, that Sam linebacker position. It's not always on the field, so you're bringing him in for some specialty situations for the most part, and he showed up. He gets the interception. Christian Roland Wallace gets the interception. Isaiah Rutherford, who I've been kind of hoping and saying, hey, this guy needs to show something. He came in with so much acclaim. Everyone said this is the guy that's a former top 110 recruit coming from Notre Dame, had every offer you'd want in the country coming out of high school. Everyone has high expectations for him. He hadn't really shown up until this last game, but to me, Arizona had to have some kind of takeaway in this game. To get 3, I think, is a bonus, positive sign for this defense, and will give them at least a little bit of confidence heading into Oregon, because if Arizona has any hope of winning this game, it's going to be because of the defense.
Trayvon Mason didn't play in that game, and his replacement was Paris Shand, and he looked pretty good throughout the game. I thought he looked pretty good. What were your thoughts of Paris's performance?
Yeah, I mean, there was a couple of times where I noticed him, making plays, and he was able to do some different things. He's not Trayvon Mason, in my opinion. I think Trayvon Mason is the better player, the more productive player at least. But he did a good job of stepping in, and I think Arizona's hope is that Trey Mason is able to get back and get on the field. They're going to need him this week. Mo Diallo was someone else who got a chance to play a little bit more. unfortunately for him, gets called for a targeting, which was maybe the worst call I've ever seen. I mean, there was just no way that it was targeting. Maybe live. I could maybe understand the referees calling that play live and saying, because you could see he lowered his head, and then he pulled away at the last second. I said he should almost be commended for doing the right thing, because how difficult that is to lower your head and then, at the last second go, oh, I don't want to get called for this. Lift up your head, hit him with your shoulder, make the right play, and to avoid that penalty, to avoid that hit, that was a big deal. And so I think for him, he should almost be commended for being able to do that. And instead, he gets called for the penalty. They review it. They say, nope, the call is confirmed, targeting. He's ejected for the second half of the NAU game. And now it means he can't play against Oregon in the first half. It's a big loss. On top of that, you have Jackson Turner, which was maybe the textbook.
That was targeting.
The textbook targeting call. If you're ever going to show, hey, this is targeting, it was that call. It was that play from Jackson Turner. He's also going to miss the first half against Oregon. That's 2 starters out for Arizona's defense against a team they don't want to have starters out. And then Jedd Fisch is hopeful that maybe they can do something about it. They sent it to the league. They're going to try and get clarification, try and get it overturned. I highly doubt that happens, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, Pac-12's shown that usually they stick with the ref's call. I don't think they ever really overturn anything in those situations. But
and even if they do, it's just going to be like, hey, we were wrong, but your guy's still out. So maybe they'll admit, hey, this was the wrong call, but we're not going to change anything. And so I think that is a very real possibility. I don't think Mo Diallo is going to be out there for the start of the game against Oregon, though.
No, and going back to the targeting and just how that's being called in college football, we've seen a lot more of that this season. Do you think that's more of the refs now anticipating those calls, that they have to call them more, or it's just so bang that they don't know what to do in that situation? Because it looks like part of the time that's in anticipation of targeting.
I think so. I think everyone's still trying to figure it all out. We're going to talk to Don Brown on Tuesday. I'm sure he's going to have some thoughts on that play, on those calls. But like I said, I thought the one on Mo Diallo, when I saw it live, and even when you saw the initial replay, you say, oh, that's targeting. And then you see a different angle, and you go, that's not targeting. You could see him lower his head, which I can understand fully. You just see a player lower his head, you assume it's helmet to helmet. But he made a great move to pull his head away and tackle him with his shoulder and avoid that helmet to helmet hit. You should get that right on replay. When you have an extra chance to watch that, you're slowing down the game already. I know there's that big concern about slowing down the game even more. And when you go to the booth or when you go to the little, viewing screen and see what you want to see and look for what you're looking for, you should be able to get that right, because we have, TVs. There's not even one close to me where I'm sitting in the press box, and it was a little bit further away, and I could still see, that clearly wasn't a targeting. It shouldn't have been called targeting. So that's not our decision to make. That's on the Pac-12 to try and figure out how they can get these calls right. But I think it is difficult, but to me, when you have that chance to review it and look it over, you should always get that call right, and that was the wrong call, both on the field and on replay.
So overall, pretty bad week for U of A football on the field with the loss to NAU. Offensively, they have a lot of things to figure out. Defensively, they improved. Hopefully, they can carry that into next week against Oregon. But before the game, Arizona landed a pretty big recruit from the East Coast. You want to tell us a little bit about him?
Yeah, Tyler Martin, a 4-star linebacker. Arizona is stacking up 4-star recruits right now. I said on a radio show I was on last week, that's never a bad deal when, the last 2 recruits in your class, the 2 latest commitments are 4-star guys, and that's what Arizona has. Especially when you're talking about what's been going on back here with a team that's lost its last 15 games. If you're able to stack some 4-star recruits, it's a big deal. Tyler Martin is definitely an impact player. He's somebody who has a long-standing relationship with Don Brown, and that really won out. It really eventually came down to Nebraska or Arizona. He took visits to both places twice, one unofficial, one official visit during the summer to both places. I don't know that he was sold on Tucson. He really raved about his trip to Lincoln, Nebraska. Not the trip necessarily I would rave about, but he really seemed to like everything about that town, about that city, about that program. But he always stressed, and to his credit, he could never separate, I want to play for this coach versus I want to go to this school. He wanted to play for Don Brown, and to him, relationships meant everything. And he was committed to Don Brown at Michigan for a while. Once Don Brown, made that transition and came here to Arizona, Tyler Martin said, I don't want to go to Michigan anymore. I'm going to back off, look at my options. He had some big options on the table. Virginia was another school that was very much involved, and so Virginia Tech was involved. So he had some different options, but it always kind of came back to playing for Don Brown. Obviously has those New England connections. Don Brown is from his same area. They have that bond that they've created because they know where each other comes from. And so I think that played a big part in it. The other aspect is he's going to be featured in this defense. I mean, Arizona needs inside linebackers. You're talking about Anthony Pandy, Trayshawn Hayward. I mean, your two starters right now on the inside, they're going to be gone. This is their last season. So you're going to need some replacements soon. I think Tyler Martin is that type of player. One thing that our Adam Friedman, our national, one of our national recruiting writers from Rivals.com, he mentioned on our message boards, kind of he had a breakdown of Tyler Martin, and one thing he said is he can't get too big. I think that would be the concern right now. Is he going to outgrow the linebacker position and potentially eventually have to become a defensive lineman? I think you want to avoid that. I think I really do like him at the linebacker spot, but he's going to have to keep everything in check. I think once they get him here in the strength and conditioning program, he'll have an opportunity to really get his body right and stay in good shape and stay in linebacker shape. But if he is, he's kind of on that border of like, he's going to be a really big linebacker and someone who's going to, create some havoc. And to me, the thing that I really like about him is his ability to be productive. I always talk about that. I think that always translates for the most part. If you're a very productive high school player, it tends to translate pretty well. And so regardless of star status and, the intangibles and all the measurables, production always wins out in my opinion. And so he's going to be able to do that. I think he ends up bringing that kind of talent with him out here to Arizona, across the country. The task now for everybody in that building behind us over here is going to be keeping everybody on board. You're out to a 3-loss, start to your season. That talk is going to start. Our recruits are going to be saying, hey, do I want to go to that school? Do I want to play for them? It's going to be up to Jedd Fisch and those coaches to really keep those players engaged. There hasn't been any sense that guys are backing off. I think it's positive for Arizona that Tyler Martin decided to commit, after they get 2 losses. I mean, he committed before this NAU loss, but they'd already got out to an 0-2 start, and he says, no, that's still the place I want to go. So that tells you there's some belief in what the coaching staff is building here, and that's going to be important, but we'll have to see kind of how it shakes out the rest of the year. To wrap things up here, though, one thing we posted on Twitter this weekend, and we're going to have everyone calling in, hopefully everyone calling in, but we want to have you guys be a part of the show, be a part of the podcast, and feature you guys, your comments, whether you have a comment about the latest game, about the team, or next week's game, whatever it is, or you have a question for myself and Troy. We want you guys to be involved as well. So we're going to put the phone number to call in down here below us, but we received a call from a fan, an Arizona fan. I'm going to play it for you now, and then we'll come back and talk about it in a second and see, what he had to say and assess, what he had to say about this team.
Okay.
Hi, Matt. My name is Adrian, longtime fan. I'm a Wildcat for life, no matter win or lose. Yesterday's loss in this season is all still due to Kevin Sumlin. Still believe in Jedd Fisch and what's going to happen this year and next year. Bear down, Arizona.
All right, so that was Adrian, if you didn't hear, calling in. Thank you, Adrian, for your call. We appreciate you leaving us a voicemail. I do like the point that Adrian made, which is Jedd Fisch needs fans like this.
Yeah.
Because they're still bought in. They still understand, and this is something he's talked about both after the game against NAU and then today again during his press conference on Monday to start the week, is that this is a process. Yep. This is something we're building as opposed to, hey, this is going to be fixed and corrected right away. I think there was that misconception that because of everything that he was selling, the fan base over the last 9 months or so, that things were changing. There was suddenly going to be an uptick in wins. I know he sold one of the members of the media on them winning a lot of games. Might be standing right next to me. I was always a little bit cautious about that. I said I thought they had a chance to win 3 games this season. More than that, it was going to be a tough sell for me. But I know you differed on that.
Yeah.
But I do think that pointing to the talent, and again, this caller mentioned Kevin Sumlin and kind of what he left this coaching staff with. We're now seeing what that is, and there's not a ton of talent here. There's not a ton of talent, and so there is some at some spots, but I do think a lot of this goes back to the previous staff, and they dug this program in a hole, and now you have to dig yourself out, and we're kind of seeing that process play out in real time with Jedd Fisch. I know it's not as quick as some fans would want it. I'm sure it's not as quick as Jedd Fisch would want it, but I think for everyone to understand that this is going to be a process, that's going to be part of it. I think the people in these buildings around us and the administration need to understand that. I'm sure that was part of the equation when they, hired Jedd Fisch. They understood this is going to be a process, and if you didn't, you had the wrong mindset about what this is. And so What are your thoughts on just what Adrian had to say and kind of this whole aspect of things?
Yeah, I completely agree with Adrian. I was one of those media members that 4 to 5 win mark. Still not a winning season, but a highly improved season. But when you look at, we saw it against NAU. I think that was the eye-opener for everybody, is the talent discrepancy between Arizona and the rest of the conference. And that isn't a Jedd Fisch problem. That's a Kevin Sumlin problem. Hell, that's a 10-year recruiting problem that Jedd Fisch is trying to fix. When Mike Stoops took over the program during the Makovic era, he had more talent, frankly, when he first came in. There was a little bit easier of a transition. You had guys like Cindric Steptoe, Mike Bell. You had guys that were there. Right now, you don't have that. You're fixing 10 years of recruiting holes, and it's going to take some time for Jedd Fisch to turn over this program. We're talking about the good things he's doing recruiting. Well, think of all the bad things that went wrong the last 10 years recruiting. So it's a process, and it's going to take time for Coach Fisch to overturn this program, but you do that through recruiting classes. And I think as long as he could still get those recruiting wins, start building up a recruiting class, Arizona should be fine for the future. But Arizona fans need to be in mind of it's a process.
Everything is about time. And in college football, it feels like the one thing coaches aren't afforded, doesn't really matter where, is time.
Yep.
And so it'll be on the fan base, it'll be on the administration, it'll be on Jedd Fisch to have patience. And this is going to take time. The one telltale sign about any season is who's on the preseason all-conference teams.
Yep.
Arizona, I believe, had one.
Michael Wiley, right?
No. It was not even it was Lucas Haversick was on the second team as the kicker.
That's right.
I voted on the poll, so I remember who I voted for. I had a couple Arizona guys on my list. Trey Mason was one of them. But I voted for Lucas Haversick, but he's the only one who ended up on the actual, on one of the all-conference teams. And that's a telltale sign about the talent on your roster. It's obviously a little bit skewed because you have to understand that not every reporter, every media member watches every single player and doesn't know about every single player, but they're getting their input from somewhere. And so you have to look at those teams, and Arizona to have just one player have to be your kicker who was, in theory, replaced in the second game. Tyler Luke never got to attempt a field goal in that game, but we were told he was replaced, that Lucas Haversick was replaced. So it's not a good situation. That's where you're really going to have to start seeing some progress, as you want Arizona players both in the draft and on those preseason all-conference teams, end of season all-conference teams as well. That'll prove some things as well. But that really tells you kind of what to expect this season. When Arizona was only able to get one guy on that team, I think that tells you kind of what everyone thought about this team and what they're capable of. So far, I'd hate to drop this, they kind of are who we thought they are.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways. In a lot of ways, from Will Plummer to Gunnar Cruz to Jordan McLeod. We've watched all the practices. We've seen kind of everything that's going on. They are who we thought they are.
They are that and more right now. So thank you for joining us for this edition of GOAZCATS.com today. And as always, we'll be back with more.
Thank you for listening to this episode of GOAZCATS.com today. GOAZCATS.com is the totally unofficial U of A fan site and your source for University of Arizona team coverage and recruiting news.